Hi everyone, it's the Catholic CEO Henry Kutarna. Welcome to the Catholic Business Wisdom Series. Today's topic, I'm going to address the question of whether you should incorporate or not. This is a common question that we get, and it's an important one because there are pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages of each of these options. So first of all, let's consider the no incorporation model, and we'll see what the pluses and deltas are on that one. Later, I'll talk about the incorporation model, and we'll do the pluses and deltas, and then I'll draw a conclusion about what I think you should do as a business owner, or if you are someone planning to start a business. First of all, the no incorporation model. In this model, you would be called a solopreneur. You would not incorporate your business in any way. You would claim your revenues and your expenses and your net profit or net loss on your personal income tax. And so you would be subject to the tax rules of your particular country or state or province on the fact that your revenue and expenses from the business are also included in your personal tax filing, which means that you may not be eligible for some of the bonus features or advantages that are available to corporations. So it's important to know what you're doing in this area. When you do not incorporate, you are not shielded from liability in any way. And that means that you could be sued for something that your business did or did not do. And if you are sued, you'd be sued personally, and therefore at risk are your family assets, your personal income, and any personal properties or assets that you own. Same with a regulatory infringement. If you are doing something even on a home-based business or a side gig, and you run afoul of some kind of a regulation regarding, let's say, emissions from your smokestack. Let's say you're a coffee roaster, and there's some rule in your neighborhood under your HOA under the type of emissions that you're able to pump into the atmosphere. If you get sued or if you get charged under some kind of a regulation, you have no liability protection because you're not incorporated. If you're non-incorporated business, you will find it very difficult to set up an advisory board. An advisory board is a powerful tool, can help you, but if you're setting up an advisory board to advise you as a person, it's just a little bit more difficult to convince people that they're actually operating to assist a serious operation. It's not to say that you're not a serious entrepreneur, but the people that you would want to attract to your advisory board are going to realize that they're advising you personally, and that's not the same thing as advising a corporation. Similarly, it will be impossible if you don't incorporate to set up a governing board. You will never be able to have another group of people actually running your business for you in the sense of governing it so that you can operate it. It will be impossible. Also, when you don't incorporate, it's difficult to hire staff because who are they working for? They're working for an individual, which means that there's not as much security or longevity to their contract or to their working relationship, because if it's an individual, something could happen to you and they're out of work immediately. Whereas if there's a corporation and something happens to you, you get injured or you're on a disability situation, well, the company continues and its work can continue by hiring somebody else to replace you. If you're not incorporated, it's also very difficult to enter into contracts with obligations to produce something, to sell something, to buy something, because the contract is you as an individual. And so that's not as, it's interesting, isn't it? It's not as valid as having a corporate entity enter into a contract. And there's a reason why, because the corporate entity is a person under the law. And so there's tremendous advantages in entering into a contract which can outlast you. If you die, your not incorporated business ceases immediately. And that's a high risk because you might owe money, people might owe you money, and therefore the complexity increases because they're going to have to deal with your estate rather than with a corporation that will continue even if you die. So that's the pros and cons of the no incorporation model. Now I'm going to turn to the pros and cons of the incorporation model. We've been covering numerous of these variations. As a quick review, if you incorporate, you will be setting yourself up as a limited liability corporation, an LLC. Or if it's a not-for-profit entity, as a charity or a foundation or some other not-for-profit setup, you're going to incorporate under a 501c3 or a 501c4 in the United States, or in Canada, or under the British system, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. You will be setting yourself up under some title like the Business Corporations Act or the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. Each jurisdiction has a different name, but the point is you'll be incorporating as either a private corporation, an LLC, a limited liability corporation, or a not-for-profit corporation. Also, there's the advantage of, in some cases, restricted cases, I feel, the B Corp or the benefits corporation. So these are additional features. The incorporation model means that you have a legal firewall. Your company itself is a person under the law, and so it will incorporate. It will then have the power to enter into contracts, to hire and fire, to do business, to buy, to sell, to enter into contractual long-term obligations. If there is a lawsuit or a regulatory infringement, you're protected. There's a firewall between you and your personal assets, your home, your family's money, your income, and of course your company's situation. A corporation is a person under the law, which means it can do three things. One, it can enter into contracts, and those contracts can outlast the individual. As we said in the non-incorporated model, if you die or get sick or are under some long-term liability, the contracts at your company can continue, and the company's obligations can continue, which means that there is a stability, a form of stability and permanence to the situation. You can, if the corporation is a person under the law, you can hire and fire, you can hold people, you can provide long-term employment, you can provide benefits. This is more attractive. It's an easier way to run a business, to be able to have longevity, permanent staff that are more experienced, staff that have lots of tenure, let's say. And of course, the corporation lives beyond you. If you die, your estate is in charge of the disposition of your shares in that company, but the company can, if it has, let's say, key-man insurance, it can hire other people, it can continue to live on beyond your own personal death or incapacity, and that's a tremendous advantage. Certainly, you can create a governing board to govern the company with its sophistication and all of the advantages of having a board of directors to govern your business. And certainly you can set up advisory boards much more easily, because people will be readily willing, one would think, to recruit people to work for your incorporated entity, because they're serving a long-term organization that goes beyond just your personal situation. In conclusion, then, what am I going to say about the advantages or the disadvantages? I'm actually not going to comment on an either-or situation. I'm not going to choose one over the other, but I am going to tell you that I believe that sequentially is how you look at this kind of a question. Should I incorporate or not? You should look at it in sequence. So, if you're an early company just starting out, a new business, and you're just getting your feet wet in the marketplace, you're just beginning to produce a product or sell a product and earn some revenue and engage in some expenses, or if you're a home-based business, or if you're a family business just starting out, or if you're a single person, one person trying to do a side gig or get started in something, there it makes a lot of sense not to incorporate. 1 or 2 or 3 years of non-incorporated status, yes, you might take the legal risk, but if you're small and you work diligently, you're unlikely to get sued by anybody, and you're unlikely to run afoul of some regulatory clause in some obscure piece of legislation. You're so small that you're not going to be producing something dangerous or that runs afoul of these complicated regulations. Beyond that, once you start to increase in revenue, and certainly once you start hiring employees and have 2, 3, 5, 10 people working for you, it would be nearly impossible to go on without an incorporated status. And so you can see what I'm doing here sequentially. In the beginning, when you're at a very early stage, maybe 1, 2, or 3 years, small revenue, getting your feet wet, just getting going, not a lot of brand recognition, you're not very well known in a wider range than your neighborhood or your town or your city, you would be fine working as a non-incorporated entity. Beyond that, though, you need to be incorporated because of all the liability protections and the governing and the advisory board setup, and also the ability to hire staff. Make a quick comment about not-for-profit. Practically impossible to begin a not-for-profit or charity without being incorporated as a 501c3, 501c4, or a B Corp or a benefits corp. It's almost impossible because no one is going to give you money for a cause if you cannot distinguish yourself personally from your entity, from your not-for-profit corporation or your charity. And you certainly can't issue a tax receipt, which is the way a lot of people will give donations these days. So there you have it. An answer to the question of whether you should incorporate or not. We've covered the no incorporation scenario, the incorporation scenario, and I've drawn a few conclusions about the sequential way that you consider this question. You don't consider it as a binary yes, no, either or situation. You look at it from the point of view of a logical progression according to some milestones and factors. So there you have it. Thanks for joining us today. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Kutarna. Thanks for coming to the Catholic Business Wisdom series, and we'll see you next time.